right, well, welcome to another episode of Traveling Through History. Really glad you're with us this week. Last week we had a really fascinating and excellent episode. I've had a lot of great feedback from you, and it was about the spies of the American Revolution and the Culper Spy Ring. And we got a lot of good feedback during that program and afterwards about questions on who is Agent 355. And you heard we talked about Agent 355 in the Culper Spy Ring program. It is still a mystery as to who she is. Historians have been trying to dig up really since the 1930s exactly who this person could have been. They've come up with a number of plausible candidates on who Agent 355 was of the Culper Spy Ring. And so today we're going to go through some of the facts that we know, some of the things that we don't know. We're going to have you help us at the end of the program guess who you think it might be out of the facts that we're going to give you. So today we're going to go through a brief bio of Agent 355, one of the most mysterious spies in American history. She has fascinated people all over the world for many, many years. There have been TV programs and books and movies done about her. And so she's really boggled the imagination and fascinated our society for a long time. So we'll go through a bio of Agent 355. We're going to go through a short video. And then we'll go through some of the detailed profiles of some of the candidates who were female spies during the American Revolution, who potentially could be the mysterious Agent 355. So let's go ahead and get into it. So 355 apparently died after 1780. That was the date that she apparently passed away. 355 was the supposed code name of the female spy during the American Revolution. It was part of the Culper Spy Ring network. This was a famous spy ring network that George Washington and Benjamin Talmadge, his right-hand man, had spun up to help spy on the British Army and officers in New York City and the surrounding regions to try to give America some intelligence as to what was going on with the British so that they could understand their movements, their troop strengths, what they were going to do next, and they could find ways to attack the British as much as possible and try to uncover those plots that maybe they couldn't have found out otherwise. The number 355, in terms of Agent 355, could be decrypted from a system that the Culper Ring had come up with in a code book. And that code actually in that code book meant lady, L-A-D-Y. And so that's why from the very beginning, historians have always thought that Agent 355 was, in fact, a female spy. This has been a national myth and pastime that many historians have been looking after for a long time. They continue to assert that she was a real historical figure. The only direct reference to Agent 355 in some of the documentation back then was from some of the Culper Ring's missives from 1778 to 1780. Agent 355 was referred to a number of times in those documents. One of the major times 355 was referred to was from Abraham Woodhull in a letter. And Abraham Woodhull was the head spy of the spy ring. He was living 55 miles from New York City up in upstate Long Island in Setauket. And Abraham Woodhull, of course, his spy name was Samuel Culper Sr. And he actually wrote a letter to George Washington where he described Agent 355 as a her, so definitely a female, and one who hath been ever serviceable to this correspondence. So in other words, she was a very key and critical member in the intelligence gathering and all of the information and letters that had been sent along to Woodhull and then through Mr. Brewster on to George Washington. In terms of some of the major successes and contributions that Agent 355 made to the Culper Spy Ring. Operating within British-controlled New York City, she gathered valuable intelligence on troop movements, supply routes, strategic military plans. She busted a number of major plots that would have been disastrous for the Continental Army, and Washington was able to avert because of her information. Often women spies were more successful than men spies, believe it or not, because the British didn't take them as seriously. Back then in that society, women were kind of second-class citizens, were not taken seriously in terms of politics or military matters at all. And so this Agent 355 was incredibly successful and able to kind of sneak under the radar to do her missions. Many of the things that she passed along to George Washington, along with the rest of the Culper Spy Ring, became very decisive in terms of the actual battle plans that were busted on the British side, or in some cases, even misinformation that got passed along to the British by the American side. The true identity of Agent 355 still remains unknown. As I said before, historians have been trying to dig up her identity for a long time, but there are some more facts about her that remain clear. So she did work with the Patriots in New York City. She was operating very close to the British generals and officers at the time. She was actually very good friends with spy master John Andre, who was the head of spying in New York City for General George Clinton for the British, General George Clinton. And so John Andre, of course, was very critical for everything that was going on the spying side related to any British movements or activities. She also was a known informant and direct friend of General Benedict Arnold, who, of course, switched over from the Continental Army to the British and was one of our major disappointments on the George Washington side. He had trusted Benedict Arnold for many, many years. He was one of our national heroes, and of course, he switched over to the British. So she was friends with both John Andre and Benedict Arnold and got a lot of key information out of both of them. One of the individuals who many historians think could have been Agent 355 was Anna Strong. And Anna Strong was a neighbor of Abraham Woodhull. She lived 55 miles away up in upstate Long Island in Setauket. And she was the agent who would do the signals to Caleb Brewster, who was the boatman. And she would go out outside of her house and put up laundry in different formations to let Brewster know when there was information to be picked up and what cove to come into with his boat, with his whaleboat. And so she was very critical in that. There's never been any connection, however, that she really spent any time in New York City, which was 55 miles away, or had any direct interaction with John Andre or Benedict Arnold. So although many historians believe Anna Strong is Agent 355, I personally, after doing a lot of research on this topic, do not believe she was Agent 355. But Anna Strong, as you'll see throughout history and in the TV show Turn, which was an excellent show, by the way, you should check it out. She did have a very key and critical part in the Culper Spy Ring and was one of the key agents for that ring. So she was definitely a possibility. Another possibility was Robert Townsend's younger sister. She was 17 years old at the time. Her name was Sally Townsend, or Sarah Sally Townsend. And she was very close to the British and to the British spies. And some of the Brits had actually taken a real liking to her, including Simcoe, who was one of the head spies working for John Andre and working for the Queen's Rangers. Simcoe had taken a very much liking to her, and he had actually set up his headquarters in the Townsend household. And so Sally Townsend, Robert's younger sister, was close to Simcoe at all times and could be hearing lots of things that were going on. So she's a real strong possibility. Another possibility was Robert Townsend's common law wife. He actually protected her identity. We never found out her name, but there was a lot of writings at the time that Robert Townsend did, in fact, have a common law wife. There was documentation and letters about that fact. And one of the reasons he likely didn't mention her name at any time was to conceal her identity. And so a very strong possibility that his common law wife that he mentioned multiple times might have also been Agent 355. So very interesting. Those three candidates right away strike out at you. There was also another woman named Elizabeth Bergen. At the time, she was working for the Culper Spy Ring. She worked as an aid worker, so that was her cover. She was feeding and bringing food to, and even medicine, to the men who were being held on the British prison ships in New York Bay. And she actually, over 3 years, was able to help 200 men escape from those prison ships. It was a really remarkable thing that Elizabeth Bergen did. And so there's some historians who actually believe maybe she was Agent 355. She was a very cool operator, very smart, and she had a good cover story, but she was able to do a lot of things there in New York City. So she's another possibility. And there's some other possibilities we'll talk about as we go. One possibility would be that Agent 355 was a category of spies related to all female spies that were working with the Culper Spy Ring. It's certainly a possibility that Agent 355 just meant all female spies. It wasn't just one individual. So very interesting, as you can see, to dig into this topic and try to figure out who this person is. And throughout this program today, we'll try to help you determine that. And at the very end, we'll ask you who you think it is. So let's take a look at a quick video, and then we'll come back and discuss it on the other side.
Agent 355 was a female spy who worked directly for George Washington during the American Revolution. Her identity is still unknown today, even though some information has been gathered. She was likely a socialite living in New York City who passed vital information about Washington's affluent enemies right back to him. She was part of the Culper Spy Ring, which operated from 1778 to 1780, located in British-occupied New York City, all the way up to Long Island, from North Connecticut all the way west to George Washington's headquarters in Newburgh, New York. The Culper Ring provided timely and accurate intelligence to American military leaders, most notably General Washington. Robert Townsend, the central figure of the Culper Spy Ring, reported that he could get good information on the British Navy, but he really couldn't obtain too much information at all about the British Army. The situation continued for months, until correspondents mentioned in a letter specifically stated, quote, "I intend to visit 727 before long, and think by the assistance of a 355 of my acquaintance shall be able to outwit them all," end quote. 727 was code for New York, while 355 was code for a lady. Within 2 months, detailed headquarters-level intelligence on the British Army began to flow to General Washington. This is the only direct reference to Agent 355 in any of the Culper Ring documents. It's believed that she was a member of a prominent loyalist family of British supporters in New York City, with very easy access to British society and British officers. Major John Andre, Chief of British Intelligence, was considered the most eligible bachelor in New York, but women were also his weakness. By the summer of 1780, General Benedict Arnold had gained command of West Point and was preparing to surrender it to the British Army in return for money. Major Andre handled the correspondence-based negotiations with General Arnold. It's speculated that it was 355 who passed along information that exposed the treason of Benedict Arnold and led to the arrest of Major John Andre, who was captured with the maps of West Point and a pass signed by Arnold in his possession. Benjamin Talmage's memoirs reveal a struggle to prevent the news of Andre's capture from reaching Benedict Arnold, who did manage to escape. Major John Andre, though, Chief of British Intelligence, confessed to the criminal allegations, and he was hanged. During the investigation of John Andre, a roundup of suspects in British-occupied territory took place. A pregnant Agent 355 was arrested and questioned. She refused to reveal any information on her activities or who the father was of the child. Agent 355 was held aboard the notorious prison ship HMS Jersey in the New York harbor. Conditions on prison ships during that time were horrific. Life expectancy once on board was literally only a few months. Agent 355 gave birth to a boy, but the baby allegedly died aboard the ship. Robert Townsend, who's believed to have had a deep emotional attachment to Agent 355, lived out his days depressed, unmarried, and he drank heavily. These are interesting things with JC.
So you can see there are a lot of interesting tidbits in that video that we need to discuss. The first one is that Robert Townsend had an affinity or an emotional attachment to Agent 355. So to me, right away, that eliminates a number of the subjects we're going to be talking about in this program. It points to me probably most likely that the Agent 355 was either his common law wife or his younger sister, Sally, or someone like that who he had a real emotional attachment to. In addition, you heard the very fateful end to Agent 355's life. She was actually pregnant with someone's baby. It could have been Robert Townsend or someone else. She refused to give up who the father was, and she refused to give up anybody that she was working with when she was finally captured. She was captured in the wake of John Andre being captured and hung by the Continental Army, which is a plot she busted. She also was captured in the wake of Benedict Arnold's treachery being uncovered. He somehow got away at West Point and was not captured by the Continental Army. He actually got away at night through the woods. But she busted so many big plots, but you can see she finally did get rounded up after that big bust of the John Andre and Benedict Arnold plots. And she was actually put on the prison ship HMS New Jersey, where she lived out the rest of her lives. And most of the prisoners on those ships either escaped or died because the conditions were so horrific. Most prisoners actually died within 6 months on those ships. Apparently, the writings back then were that she actually did give birth to the baby before she died. Nobody ever heard or have any record of what happened to that baby. So very interesting, very sad end for this great hero to our revolution, and somebody who divulged so much critical and key information to our Army so that we could get our independence. So let's go ahead and look at some of the profiles of the individuals who could potentially be Agent 355, and I'll let you make your determination as you listen. All right, so who was Agent 355? We talked about she died after 1780. It was code name of a female spy during the American Revolution who was part of the Culper Spy Ring, one of the first spies for the United States, and her real identity remains unknown today. Number 355 was decrypted in the system of the Culper Spy Ring, and it was used to mean lady, and that's singular lady. Agent 355's contribution to the Culper Spy Ring were instrumental to its success. Operating within British-controlled territory, she gathered valuable intelligence on troop movements, supply routes, and strategic military plans, and transmitted that vital information through the Culper network, enabling George Washington and his generals to make informed decisions that often proved decisive on the battlefield. The way her code is constructed indicates she may have had some degree of social prominence. The reason they say that is because there actually was a code in the code sheet that also meant woman, and they didn't use that one. They used this item over here, as you see in the bottom left, 355, meaning lady or someone of social prominence. She was living in New York City at the time, and at some point had in contact and friendship with John Andre and Benedict Arnold, and eventually outed them both. One person who was named as a possible identity of 355, as we mentioned, was Anna Strong, who was Woodhull's neighbor, Woodhull being the chief spy for the Culper Spy Ring. Other theories that Agent 355 might have been Robert Townsend's common law wife, or Sally Townsend, who was his younger sister, or even Elizabeth Bergen, who was the woman that was helping prisoners escape from the ship. So those are all possibilities, and we'll talk about some of the others that could have been Agent 355. So let's talk about Anna Strong as the key member of Culper Spy Ring, but was she Agent 355? You can see the picture in the middle there of her. That's the actress who played her in the show Turn, which I mentioned earlier. It's an excellent show. You should check it out on AMC. It broadcast from 2014 to 2017. You see another picture above that of Anna Strong and the way she would signal to Caleb Brewster with the black petticoat, meaning information was ready to pick up. And then, as you see there, she would put several handkerchiefs telling him which of the 6 coves to come in on. In this case, she had 4 handkerchiefs up, which meant for Mr. Brewster to come to cove number 4 to do the information pickup. She would always meet with Woodhull as well, since Woodhull was her direct neighbor. The two of them would collaborate and coordinate on everything that was going on with the Culper Spy Ring. So rumors have swirled for many years that she was the Agent 355 whose identity was never determined. As I said before, I think it's unlikely it was her, only because she lived so far away from New York City. She had no way to get into New York City. She didn't have any family living there and no real contacts in New York City. In a lot of cases, the Culper Spy Ring, the agents didn't even know who each other were, and that was by design. You knew who your next informant was, and you would hand off to that person. But for the most part, you didn't know who any of the other members of the spy ring were. So I think it's unlikely it's Anna Strong. The next one is Sally Townsend. She was another critical member of the Culper Spy Ring. You can see there's two excellent books written about Sally Townsend as a patriot. Definitely recommend both of those. The bottom book there, Kit Sargent wrote the book Agent 355, and he proposes that Sally Townsend was, in fact, Agent 355 as the younger sister of Robert Townsend. She was only 17 years old when she started doing her spying activities, so she was very young. She was very attractive and vivacious, and she earned the affections of Lieutenant John Graves Simcoe, who succeeded command of the Queen's Rangers from Robert Rogers. Simcoe had established his headquarters in the Townsend home, and of course, Sally lived there. So when he was often visited by British armies, John Andre or other British generals, young Sally used her influence over them to gain British secrets, which she then passed along to her brother. Sally told Robert about how she overheard Simcoe and Andre discussing plans to capture West Point, thanks to Benedict Arnold's treachery. So rumors for many years have swirled that Sally might actually be the secret Agent 355. And I think she is much more likely to be. She was in the right place. She was right in the middle of all the British officers and army. As you heard, Robert Townsend, her older brother, said that he could spy on and get lots of information on the British Navy, but he didn't have a direct in on the army. Well, his sister did because of the connection with Simcoe at the Townsend household. So third here is Elizabeth Bergen. She's the spy we mentioned earlier, and you can see her on the top left there, and the prison ship that she would often go to serve food to for prisoners who were housed on that ship. In 1779, she was approached by George Higday, a member of the Culper Spy Ring, to help prisoners of war escape the prison ships. Sometime later, the British intercepted a letter sent by George Washington to Benjamin Talmadge, which talked about Higday's espionage. On July 13, 1779, Higday's home was raided by the British and arrested. He was arrested, and his wife, in order to help her husband, told the British about Bergen. As a result, British authorities attempted to locate her and placed a bounty of 200 pounds on her head. She hid for 2 weeks before moving to Long Island, and after hiding for another 5 weeks on Long Island, she finally moved to Connecticut and then Philadelphia. In October 1779, she received a flag of truce from the Board of War in order for her to get her children from New York back to Philadelphia to rejoin her. However, she was not allowed to take any of her clothes or furniture. And since she essentially at the time had nothing, she received an annuity from Congress starting in 1781 and claimed those funds through 1787. So she got that annuity because of her spying activities and her other things that she did for the Culper Spy Ring. And as you can see, she helped free over 200 prisoners from that ship. So there is some rumor that Elizabeth Bergen could also be Agent 355. Another individual that has been rumored is Peggy Shippen. She was a socialite and an accomplice. She was born into a renowned Philadelphia family. She was a socialite. She was very politically astute and surrounded by people of influence at a young age. In 1777, the 17-year-old began a long friendship with British Major John Andre, who was the intelligence chief to British General Sir Henry Clinton. That same year, she also introduced Benedict Arnold, and she got married to Benedict Arnold 2 years later. So she not only knew Andre and was friends with Andre, but she actually married Benedict Arnold. Her friendship with Andre allowed Shippen to easily connect him with her husband. By some accounts, it was Shippen who first encouraged Arnold to consider siding with the British. She also relayed communications between the two officers, sometimes crafting messages herself. It was through these communications that the pair devised their scheme for Arnold to request command of West Point. Following Andre's capture, Shippen was informed of her husband's treachery, but she claimed ignorance and feigned a historical state. Later, banished from Philadelphia, she was permitted to reunite with Arnold And in the wake of the final British defeat, the couple moved to London. So there's some fringe talk about her being Agent 355, but I just don't see it because of her loyalist sympathies. She was married to Arnold. She moved to England later in her life. I don't think she would have done any of those things if she was truly Agent 355 and had been helping George Washington. But you never know. I mean, she could have been a double agent. It's certainly possible, but I've personally kind of ruled her out at this point. Robert Townsend's common law wife, another very popular theory in terms of who Agent 355 could have been. Most accounts were that Robert Townsend, who was the primary informant in New York City for the Culper Spy Ring, was in love with Agent 355, and he was very depressed and became despondent when she died on the British prison ship HMS New Jersey. Many historians now believe it is likely Agent 355 was actually Robert Townsend's common law wife at the time, a woman who was mentioned several times in letters by Townsend, but never by name. He possibly never mentioned her name to protect her anonymity as an actual Agent 355 as coded in the Spy Ring's code book. So this one makes a lot more sense to me. She was in New York City. She was married to Robert Townsend. Nobody would ever give her real name. He was in love with her, and he was depressed when she died on the prison ship and became despondent and actually kind of disconnected for the rest of the ring after she died. So this one does make a lot of sense as a possibility. Next one was Mary Underhill. Could Agent 355 been Abraham Woodhull's own sister, Mary Underhill? And of course, just as a reminder, Abraham Woodhull was the chief spy for the ring. He lived up in upstate Long Island in Setauket, was neighbors with Anna Strong, and had a little sister named Mary Underhill who lived in New York City, in Manhattan. And he would often visit her and stay in her boarding house whenever he visited. She was an excellent cover for him when he was stopped at British Army checkpoints and would give the excuse, "I'm just going to see my sister." So many historians now believe that Agent 355 must have lived in the city and close to British generals and officers to get the critical information that turned the war in the Continental Army's favor. Mary Underhill would have been a perfect agent for her brother to visit and collaborate with, and planned to be around with all the events that were happening, that spying would have been the most fruitful. So you can see why Mary Underhill is also a possibility for Agent 355. One other possibility, and if you look again at the code book, lady equals 355, was Agent 355 actually more than one woman in the Culper Spy Ring? Certainly a possibility that the code book 355 lady actually referred to a category of spy, meaning all the ladies that were in the network. Historians believe it's certainly worth considering that all the above female agents we just mentioned, who are all part of the spy ring simultaneously, all could have been referred to as Agent 355. Although it's curious that it says lady rather than ladies in plural. There was also a code for woman, which was 701. So 355 clearly was lady of some societal consequence. So certainly an interesting theory here that maybe it was not just one individual, maybe it was multiple spies that were categorized as 355. Interesting, Agent 355 has been so fascinating to our culture for so many years that, as you can see here, the mysterious identity and the fact that she was a female at a time when females didn't take such roles typically have made her an inspiration to a number of cultural shows and movies. The first one, as you can see there to the left, is an excellent book by Alexander Rose called Washington Spies, the story of America's first spy ring, about the Culper Spy Ring. And it actually was the inspiration for the series there you see, Turn, Washington Spies, which was on AMC from 2014 to 2017. It was 4 full seasons. Highly recommend you watch that show. It's really exciting, really well done, excellent acting. They stay very close to the script in terms of what really happened in history. So I highly recommend you look at that. There was also another show called White Collar, which was a cop investigation show. And they actually did 2 episodes, one on the Culper Spy Ring and one on Agent 355 specifically, where they delved into the real deep details of investigating who 355 might have been. So White Collar is another show you can find out there. Another one I mentioned is The Last Man up in the top right. In 2015 was a TV show where they spent multiple shows talking about the Culper Spy Ring, and there was actually a Agent 355 character in that show. Then in 2020, you can see there, Rebel Spy came out. This was by a Brazilian author named Victoria Rossi. I actually read through some of this book, and it's really fascinating. She's Brazilian, but she became so fascinated with 355 that she actually moved to the United States for 2 years to write this book, and it's really, really well done. And then the final item I'd mention is in 2022, 2 years ago, there was a movie that came out from the producers of the Jason Bourne movies called The 355, and it was about a series of 5 spies from different countries who all came together. The American ones were out of the CIA, all came together in a little ring called the 355, and were busting big plots during the movie. So you can see Agent 355 is very popular in our popular culture, and for good reason. So let's look at what Agent 355's profile would be if you were trying to crack the case on who she actually was. You can see up in the top there, you had your loyalists to the left, you had your patriots to the right. It was kind of a big web of people that were all gathering information from each other on both sides. So what would Agent 355's profile be, and what was the evidence showing us out of history? First one is she was likely a classy woman in New York City social circles, so she was kind of a socialite. She was close to British generals and officers in New York City and could overhear discussions about plans and troops and plots. So very important that you place her directly in New York City and around the officers. Another one was she was close associate of Robert Townsend and Abraham Woodhull. So that certainly means that it could be several people on the list that we talked about. She knew British spymaster John Andre personally. She knew General Benedict Arnold personally. Her cover was so good, the British didn't suspect her. So it's really important thing to think about there, that they were so comfortable around her, they would just have loose lips every time they were drinking beer at a social event. And finally, she was a patriot, obviously, somebody who was helping the Continental Army and the Americans gain independence. So that's kind of the agent profile for 355. So let's do a fun little exercise. What I'd like you to do is, as we close this program, why don't you drop a comment down below in this video and tell us which of these candidates you think was Agent 355. And then I'll tell you who I think it is. So the first one is Anna Strong. Do you think it was Anna Strong? She's the agent who was up in Setauket, Long Island, neighbors with Abraham Woodhull. Do you think it was Sarah Sally Townsend? She was the younger sister of Robert Townsend, who was our primary spy in New York City. She, again, was around the British generals and British officers. Many of them were actually housing in her family residence. So she was around a lot of the information that was needed. Could it be Robert Townsend's common law wife, who he would not name because he wanted to protect her anonymity, and the person that he was in love with and was very depressed by when she died on a prison ship? Could it have been Elizabeth Bergen? She was the spy and agent working for the Culper Spy Ring who acted like she was an aid worker to help prisoners on the prison ship, but actually, over the course of 3 years, helped 200 of them escape. So could it have been Elizabeth Bergen? Was it Mary Underhill? This was the younger sister of Abraham Woodhull, and he would regularly ride from Setauket, Long Island, into New York City to go see her, and he would actually stay at her house there and coordinate with her. So certainly possible Mary Underhill could have been Agent 355. Could it have been Peggy Shippen Arnold? This was the American-born socialite who was around all of these officers almost on a nightly basis and was actually married to Benedict Arnold. Could she have been a double agent, although most of us think she was a loyalist? Certainly possible. Or do you think it could have been a combination of all of them were in the category of Agent 355? So in other words, was it not just one person, but it was multiple spies all categorized as lady? So what do you guys think? Go ahead and drop a comment down below. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Agent 3525 has fascinated historians and people who love revolutionary and history in general for a long time, including myself. And I was really happy that after we did the Culper Spy Ring episode last week, that we had some comments from you that you wanted more detail and more information on Agent 355 and who was it. So I decided to do this episode today. Hope you'll dig into it a little bit more and go down that rabbit hole yourself. It's really fascinating. There's some great books out there, great material that you can get your hands on and take a look at. And as you saw, some great TV shows and movies that you can watch as well if it fascinates you. Hopefully you'll like this video down below and subscribe to our channel, Traveling Through History. We love bringing this material to you, and we have many good programs coming your way. And thank you so much for your attention today, and hope you love history.